A very warm welcome, everyone, today on Wednesday, the 20th of October, for our regular question and answer session, where you can ask us anything that's going on in the council area of BCP Council, whether you're joining us by Twitter, by Facebook, by LinkedIn, or by YouTube, or across all of the social media channels now. And I'm here for the next 30 minutes, where it's your opportunity to ask us any questions about pretty much anything you want, and we'll try and answer as many of the questions as we can live today, but also feed up for those questions that we aren't able to answer afterwards. So everyone should be able to get an answer to anything that you want to know. My name is Phil Broadhead. I'm the Deputy Leader of the Council. I cover a number of different areas such as regeneration, the economy and planning. So in particular, if you've got any questions about those today, I'd be happy to answer them. But as Deputy Leader of the Council, obviously can try and answer as many other questions you have about pretty much anything you want. So today and now is your time. We host these very regularly, and I hope it's a really interactive way of being able to find out what's going on and answer any questions. I'll start, as we quite often do, with some of the most important headlines. Obviously, number one is COVID. We're still not out of the COVID crisis, as we all know. So I thought it's a good idea just to give you an update on some of the coronavirus figures. As we've seen nationally, cases are continuing to creep up, which was pretty much what was expected over the winter period. So it's nothing that I don't think wasn't on the radar. We have seen quite an increase in the last week, again, alongside most of the other areas in the country. About 1,600 cases, confirmed positive cases across the BCP area in the last 7 days, and our rate for per 100,000 is now running at about 350. I think crucially, what we're still seeing is that although there's a slight increase in those over 60s rates, and they're those quite often that are the most vulnerable, they do remain very low. The majority of the rates that we're seeing at the moment are between the 11 to 16-year-old age group, which is again what we've been seeing for some time. Hospitalization rates at the moment are about 30 to 40 per week. The indications that we have from our colleagues in public health are that we expect that might peak in the November-December period, probably somewhere around the 60s, around that kind of level. So that's what we're expecting. But I think crucially, the death rates are remaining, thankfully, very low at the moment. But I think the real key message at the moment is that we're by no means out of the woods yet. Cases are obviously increasing. So if you have not yet been vaccinated, there is still absolutely time to do it, and you can do that online. And of course, we're now at the stage where many people are getting their booster vaccinations, and that's both for COVID, but also the flu vaccine. So if you are in the category that is eligible for those, please do take up the offer. Everyone else, obviously, we just need to keep remaining vigilant as much as possible. So that's the COVID update. We've now got the ability to answer any questions that you like. So whichever medium you're joining us via, if you put the question in the comment, I'll try and answer as many as we can, and also give you some of the other headlines for what else we're up to across the Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole area. So I've had a question. Let's have a little look. See if we've got any now. I've got a question from Mark John about responsible dog owners. Maybe harsher penalties for non-responsible dog owners would be more effective. This is two questions from Mark John, actually. So the second one was about responsible dog owners. I think that's absolutely right. We've launched a big campaign. You probably will have seen it, called Greener, Cleaner, Safer, which is about making sure that we've got as much pride in our area as possible. So we put a tremendous amount of extra money, particularly over this winter period, into all of those things that really make a difference, whether that's street cleaning, sign cleaning, painting street furniture, fixing potholes, etc., etc. And so there's a lot that we can do. I mean, we're almost, I think, tripling the amount of money that we're putting into, for instance, into clearing weeds off the roads. But of course, we are all in this together as well. So I absolutely agree with your comment that we need to make sure that those dog owners that are not paying attention to the rules are able to do so. We'll have a look at the kind of the penalties on that, but it's never quite as easy as we think. Quite often we've trialed penalties before. You actually have to see people doing it, which is the slightly difficult one. But I think the key is we are all in this together, and we need to make sure that that everybody plays their part in this. Right. Actually, just before I move on to the questions, and please keep them kind of coming in, because I need to have a certain amount so that we can actually make sure that we've got some answered. I've got a bit of an update which might be quite interesting on that greener, cleaner, safer agenda, which is about some of the highways maintenance that is taking place across the next few weeks across the Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole area. So all throughout this month of October, we're seeing a huge resurfacing program across the area. 28 roads that we're actually going to be resurfacing as part of our pothole prevention strategy, and that's using micro asphalt. So it's quite a quick way of doing it, and it's been done in a number of areas already. Some of the key roads are going to be receiving this treatment shortly: Parkside Road, Woodside Road, a lot of the cliff top roads, particularly in the Bournemouth area, Boscombe Cliff Road, Boscombe Overcliff Drive, Southbourne Overcliff Drive. So do be aware that there may be some road closures while we're doing that program. We're also on the 18th of October starting our heavy duty resurfacing on Poole Hill. And that will have a 14-day closure. So there's going to be a lot of diversions around that area as well. But I think it's really good news that we're seeing, over 28 roads in the next few weeks alone that are seeing some, really positive improvements on our road surfacing. Right. Let me have a little look at some of the questions that we've got coming in. A question from Graham Tuffing about Marks and Spencer's. Can there be any support offered to Marks and Spencer's to stay open in Poole? Well, this is a topical one this week, haven't we? For those that aren't aware, we heard the news this week that Marks and Spencer's are going to be closing in December their store in Poole. Graham, it's a really good question. None of us want to see it go. I think it's been, how long has it been in Poole now? We must have had it for 50 years. It's been a real staple of the high street. Of course, these things are changing, aren't they? And I think these stores are closing because obviously people aren't using them anymore. We can't do anything about M&S. We don't actually own the building they're in. We've been working really closely with Legal and General that actually own the Dolphin Centre about how we can help and what goes next. We are, however, putting a lot of work into the whole high street renewal with a particular emphasis on Poole. We've got our big plan, and Poole regeneration and rejuvenation has been pretty central to that. I'm a slight optimist on this, and whilst it's really disappointing that Marks and Spencer's are going, we've seen a number of similar stores close recently, and a lot of them have been revitalised in a different fashion. So we've got Bobby's in Bournemouth, for instance, that was where the department store Debenhams used to be. I think that's really injected a real life into Bournemouth Town Centre, and of course in Poole itself. Upstairs, I don't know where many of you know, but you've got an amazing climbing centre and parkour centre, and lots of kind of new innovative things that tend to fill these spaces. So the world moves on, and what we don't want to see is just empty high streets and empty shops. We'll be working really closely with them to see what happens in the future. But quite often, the future can be more positive than the past. So I'm an optimist on that one. It's sad to see them go, but we're working really closely with them to figure out what we can do to support them in the future. But unfortunately, we don't actually own that building. Right, so keep your questions coming in. Got a few comments about thank you for doing these sessions. Vicky Wellard, what are you doing to get the waiting time down for assessments and therapies for children with additional needs? It's a really, really good question, Vicky. Not my area of expertise, but what I can tell you is that we're putting a tremendous amount of extra resources into particularly the children's services and the SEND sectors at the moment. We, an extra £10 million a year we're actually putting into the children's services section because we need to. Our children, and particularly our most vulnerable children, are the ones that are the most important. So we'll have some more news on that, not just throughout the course of this year, but also the new budget that we'll be bringing forward in February. I think also worth noting that we'll be very shortly announcing what we're calling our winter resilience plan, because we talked at the beginning of this session about the fact that COVID is still not gone away. We all know from everything that we're seeing that this winter is going to continue to be tough. That's everything from added impacts on because of things like the HGV problems, so some of the supply chain problems, but also some of our most vulnerable people are going to find it even harder this winter because of things like the changes with the energy fuel prices situation as well. So we're putting together a winter resilience plan that covers all of those areas, from the place to people to making sure that our council services are as resilient as possible. Because we've got to have it, we've got to make sure that we've got a plan before the problems arise, so that we try and get ahead of them. But the extra investment in particular we're putting into our most vulnerable children and most vulnerable families, we'll be spelling out more in the next few weeks, particularly around the winter support that we're able to offer to children. But I'll try and get somebody, Vicky, to come back with a more detailed answer to your question on exactly what we're doing for those with additional needs. It's not my area of expertise, but I know that we're putting a lot more time and effort into it. Right, a question from Ray Nottage via LinkedIn. Hello, Ray. Nice to hear from you. Is it the intention to apply for city status for BCP? Okay, so a bit of background to this, and actually we've heard in the last few days in Southend that they've just been awarded city status. But that was on the back of an announcement that Her Majesty the Queen made, that as part of the Jubilee celebrations, areas, either councils or individual towns, can, if they want to, apply for city status, and then it will be a competitive process, and the Queen will be awarding a number of city statuses later on in the year. We've taken some soundings on this and taken the decision that as the BCP Council area, doesn't seem to be much appetite for BCP to become a city. We're already considered to be a city region by government, so we get that status, and with the extra investment that comes in, because we are one larger urban area and we're very, very connected. But of course, the three towns, both Bournemouth, Poole and Christchurch, have their own individual identities, which is really important as well. And having a new city doesn't seem to make sense with that. So what we've done is we've reached out to the mayors of both Poole, Christchurch and Bournemouth and asked them to go back to their bodies, which is the town council in Christchurch and the parish councils all mixing in with that, the chartered trustees of Poole and Bournemouth, to ask those individual towns whether they wanted to apply for city status, because the council actually have to do that on their behalf. So that is going on at the moment, and then whatever those towns decide, we will do. So if Christchurch decide to come back and say, well, for instance, Dorchester have applied to be a city, well, we want to be on that as well. We want Christchurch to apply for city status, then we'll put that forward. If they say no, we won't. And the same will go with Bournemouth and Poole as well, because I think it's really important that we maintain the identities of those areas. So we'll see what the outcome of that in the next few weeks. Of course, even if all three towns decided that they all wanted to apply for city status, it is a competitive process, and we'll have to see what Her Majesty says. But there are some real bonuses to city status for the towns. Not everybody's keen on it. We'll just listen to what the towns say and we'll act accordingly. But thanks for that question, Ray, and it's good to clear that up. There's been some a kind of background noise of people not quite understanding exactly what that plan is. A question from Alicia. When will we see the regeneration plans for Poole? Again, has come in via LinkedIn. Thank you for the question, Alicia. Something that's really close to my heart. I lead on regeneration. As I mentioned earlier on, we put the regeneration and the rejuvenation of Poole as one of the 6 main areas of our big plan. Not because Poole is more important than any other part of the area, because it's probably the area that's seen the least of the investment that's probably needed in our town centres of all of the areas. It is looking a little bit tired now. Ironically, it's actually still a really bustling high street. We've seen with things like the Kingland initiative and all of the work that we're doing through the Poole Business Improvement District and the improvements that we've made on the quay, that it's still really bustling. But actually that regeneration agenda, we've got stalled sites all over the place. We needed to take action on that. We've now set up our own fully council-owned urban regeneration company called Future Places. That team is now up and running, and they're currently in the process of putting all of these plans together and working with partners like Legal and General and Network Rail, with things like the train station, to really start getting action on the ground rather than just talking about it. We'll have more to announce on that shortly, but we've probably got £2 to £3 billion of sites across the area, many of which are in Poole, such as the former power station site, that really need to get on. We've got some real talent now leading that organisation. We're using something called a stewardship initiative as part of that. So rather than just taking the individual sites and getting on and building flats here or flats there, we're using the ability that we have to control all of these to curate it in a really, really connected way so that we can add value, build homes for local people in particular. I'm really excited what that team is going to be able to achieve, and a tremendous amount of extra effort into that. Phase 1 has already happened, of course. At the recent full council, we approved to take forward the Carter's Quay development, which is in between the 2 bridges on the the north side. And actually, we've already contracted a builder to build that out. That work is going to start in the spring. So in direct question, when will the regeneration plans start? Well, actually, they're going to be cranes in the sky from spring, and that will be building 160 homes, which will be rented to local people. So rather than just that development coming forward and people could buy them for second homes, they'll be put on the market for private rental. And you know, I'm really pleased with that, so that we can fill the gap there and get that regeneration underway. So thanks for the question. A tremendous amount more to come. We now have the ability with the structures that we put in place to actually be able to achieve that. Right, let's have a look at some of the other questions. Right. Let me have a little look. Right, Lee Atkins has a question. When are you going to stop closing the road and reopen the ones you closed that no one wants? Okay, very, very topical question. Well, for a start, most of the roads, and this is not a political point, but we came into administration, we're a Conservative-led administration that came in a year ago. That was on the back of you know, a lot of roads being closed around the area without any consultation whatsoever, which, you know, clearly didn't go down very well with the public. You know, on the one hand, there's the argument that we were in difficult times, it was COVID, you know, and we had these emergency powers, but I've always certainly very, very strongly felt that you really shouldn't be doing anything like closing roads unless you do public consultation and crucially listen to the outcome, listen to the people on the ground that are elected to represent their representatives. There's not a whole host of road closures being planned. We do have the £100 million Transforming Cities, Transforming Travel programme that is currently underway, which is putting a new sustainable corridor through. It's £100 million that we've got from government. Key to that is improving the ability for those that can to walk and cycle more with new cycle routes and things, because this isn't about, you know, discouraging people from driving, but of course we do have a major congestion problem. And really interesting statistics is that if just 5% of people that could cycle on very short journeys actually cycle, it pretty much resolves most of the congestion problems around the area, which means that for those of us, you know, particularly the elderly, or those of us that need to drive to work and drive the kids to school, that can drive, we can do it because those that want to cycle have the ability to do it. So that's the primary aim of the Transforming Cities. It's not about punishing car users, it's about enabling those that want to and can sustainably travel to do so. There are a few parts along that route where we've been consulting on some minor road closures to channel the traffic in the right way to help to smooth traffic flow. Again, we've been doing lots of public consultation on that, but crucially, the portfolio holder, Mike Green, on this one, who's in charge of the transport, has said that he will be listening to local councillors on the ground. They're the ones that know best. So if you're not happy with any of the things that are going on in your area, feed that through to your local councillors, because what we're trying to do is not decide that we know best and we're going to only do what we want to do. We're putting that most of the decisions into the hands of the local councillors. And if you know, brutally, if you don't like those decisions, let them know. But you know, remember next time when the elections come up, because they're the ones that are supposed to be representing you on the ground. Right. Let us have a look at some other questions while I wait for a few more questions to load, because mine is taking a little bit of time. I'll just go through a few other headlines of things that you might be interested in. I mentioned at the beginning I lead on the strategic planning side. So that's things like, where are our homes going to be built in the future? And you may well have heard that we're in the process of developing something called our local plan, which is the new major planning policy for where all of our homes, businesses, pretty much everything are going to be built over the next 15 years. It's a really important document to get right. We've taken the approach on that to go to consultation first. So rather than coming up with a plan and consulting on it, we're putting out something called the local plan issues and options consultation, which will be released, I think, probably by the end of next month, that will detail all of the different issues and all of the different options that we have to consider as part of our where do we build our homes for the future, so that we can feed those issues out, listen to the public feedback, and then use that to actually formulate the plan. One of the key developments that we've had on that in the last few months is that, as we all know, population's growing, and we have housing targets from government that have to reflect what the population growth is on the ground. And those figures that were coming back by the calculation from government were showing that we probably have to build about 2,700 homes per year, which is a really, really tough challenge, and would probably mean that we would have to open up some of our green belt. Now, you could argue that Greenbelt release means more family homes, but actually nobody really wants to open Greenbelt unless it's strictly necessary. So we've done a little extra piece of work to make sure that that 2,700 figure is actually the right figure. And we've actually come up with some solutions that show that the projections that we've got to work from, which are the 2014 projections that government is very insistent that we work on, absolutely fine, we've got to play the game on this. But actually there were some errors in that projection, particularly around our student population and the assumption that they're going to stay when clearly a lot of them don't. So we've been working with some real experts in this area and using the correct information within that. We now think that our housing figure could be reduced by about 1,000 per year. And that will have a dramatic impact on the ability to try and protect our green belt. Now, it's not the panacea, it's not the the only solution. We've still got other pieces of work like a housing needs assessment to work into that. But that could and should make a real difference for us having the ability to actually shape that placemaking that we want to. Because if our numbers are too high, then we lose quite a lot of control. So pretty clear in my mind, population's growing. In particular, we need to be trying to really focus on building homes for our younger people. But I think the ability to have a lower housing limit rather than the 2,700 via this really innovative way that I've come up with myself and the team should enable us to crucially do that, but also protect our green belt at the same time. So very innovative way of doing things, but hopefully should make the difference. But if you're interested in all of this, make sure you look out for the local plan issues and consultations document, which will be coming out in about a month. Right, so thought you'd appreciate that little update. Right, let's have a little look through some of the questions that are coming in online. Thank you to everyone that's feeding these in. Dave Mans has a question. Right, what's your question, Dave? Bus companies should be going over to hybrid vehicles. Currently, 4.5 litre and 7.5 litre engines in buses is not helping the environment. What can you do as council leaders to enforce this? Super good question, because as we're seeing, we've got COP26 coming through. We've declared a climate change emergency. We came in a year ago, and unfortunately, the previous administration had cancelled all the spending on the climate change. We put that back, we've doubled it, we've quadrupled it. So we really, really take it seriously. But of course, we can't do everything. We need to work with partners like our bus companies to make sure that they play their part as well. We're really fortunate in this area that we actually don't have that many bus companies. And I say that's fortunate because what it means is that we know the people that are running the bus companies. We actually have a really, really productive relationship with them. So we're working really closely with them about the infrastructure that might be needed to change buses to things like hybrid engines, either hydrogen or electric, and there's some really innovative work going on that. We're also in discussions with government because one of the benefits we have, and a lot of people don't like the term city region, but we are, in the collective area about 500,000 people, and that does catch the eye of government for getting funding to do interesting stuff because we are congested and we need to do more in this area. So we are in talks about using that scale that we've got to be a trial area to launch some of these things like the more sustainable bus routes. So lots of connected conversations happening with our bus companies at the moment. I'm the first to be public when I think we haven't got good relationships with people, but I'm really honest that actually the bus companies that we've got locally generally are really good guys. We're working really closely with them, and I think we've got some really innovative solutions going up, particularly with the conversations that we're having with government about whether we can get some extra funding for the infrastructure that's needed to move our buses from dirty diesel buses to more hybrid and sustainable vehicles in the future. So a lot going on in this area, and I'm pretty confident we'll start to see some movement on it in the very near future. So Dave, thank you very much for your question. I'm really passionate about this, and when we're looking at our things like the local plan and our infrastructure plans in the future, we're always thinking about what is the future going to look like, how our electric vehicles going to use it, how our bus is going to be using it, because I think that's really, really important. Right, and another one on this, Andrew Hardman. Oh gosh, a long one. We declared a climate emergency some time ago. Should it be encouraging to switch to electric vehicles? We're strongly in favour of, considering the vast amounts of the current housing stock preclude this switch due to any lack of designated spaces, hence not having the ability to have a charging point. Right, you're actually a little bit wrong on this one, Andy, and I think Andrew. Sorry, you'll be pleased to hear. So we now have an updated parking policy and a SPD, which actually says that any new developments, particularly family homes, so those ones that are not in our city urban centre locations, not only have to have parking, but they have to have an electric charging point as part of their planning permissions. So any homes that are built rather than apartments in those very urban areas have to now, as part of our new updated planning policy, have those charging points. And I think that's really important, because I think we're only a few years away from, we're tipping over to the edge where most people are starting to buy electric cars from new. Now, in our very urban centres, we've now got a planning policy that says that actually, if you are in one of those very accessible locations like Bournemouth Town Centre or the very centre of Poole, developers don't have to provide one parking space with every property anymore. And that's based on fact. I mean, in Bournemouth alone, for instance, we're now finding that over 50% of people that live in central Bournemouth don't have access to a car and don't have a car. So those people that live in those very sustainable locations are quite happy to buy, for instance, an apartment without parking. And nobody that has a car is going to go out and buy a new apartment without a parking space. So what we need to do is, in areas that do need parking, we make sure that parking spaces are provided, and crucially, they've got that electric infrastructure. In those very sustainable areas where people don't have cars, we're enabling developers to build properties that don't have parking spaces, but do have extra provision for things like cycle storage and things like that. Because, like, as I'd said earlier on, nobody is going to buy a one-bedroom apartment in a city centre type location without parking and bring a car, because you can't. So actually, it really helps us with that climate change agenda as well. But where parking is necessary, they will have that electric infrastructure as well. But thank you very much for the question, Andrew. Right, we've got about 4 minutes left, so let me just see and have a look through some of the other questions that we've got coming in. Right, they all pop up on my screen quite quickly. So as I said earlier on, if any questions I'm not able to answer on here, we will try and make sure that somebody from the team comes into them later on. Right, a question on the budget from Aid. Can you comment on the BCP budget that was talked about in the Echo? It feels a lot like the council has found Corbyn's magic money tree. Well, if only magic money trees existed. Magic money trees, Aid, you're right, don't exist. But what does exist is really sound financial management. When we took control from the previous administration a year ago, we inherited a £50 million black hole. Within the year, we turned that into a £5 million surplus. It's all to do with proper financial management. And during that time, we've also increased expenditure in pretty much all of the areas. We've been able to do that whilst also having one of the lowest council tax rises in the country, because we know how to manage the finances. And what we also did as part of that budget was created something called our £50 million Futures Fund. And what that is, brutally, is that we've got £40 million of savings that we're achieving over the next few years as part of our transformation programme, bringing the councils together, getting rid of inefficiencies. And that's released the ability to have some extra borrowing so that we can do stuff with that Futures Fund. Like, for instance, this week we'll be announcing, finally, that we're able to make Folkestone Station an accessible station with new lifts and a station refurb that we're partly funding through the money that we've managed to create it. Now, we'll be coming forward with our new budget in February, because we've got some extra financial challenges that we've had over the last few months. We've had to put a lot more money into children's services, which, let's be honest, is the right thing to do at this time, but that brings extra pressures. However, without giving too much away, again, we found through sound financial management and also looking at creative ways to use our assets to be able to plug that those financial difficulties and continue to invest, particularly in our most vulnerable people in the future. So we'll have more to say in February. It's not a magic money tree. It's just knowing how to manage finances properly, but also to make sure that you're looking at all of the options that you can do. When a council such as ours owns an awful lot of assets, are we releasing the value of those assets to invest in the next generation? We haven't been. We found a way to unlock that. That's where a lot of this financial freedom comes from. I'm really pleased that it means that we get to look after the most vulnerable and invest in our future whilst being able to do it. So no magic money tree, just sound financial management. And I think we've got just time for one more question. Lindia Solomon, are there any plans for realistic road resurfacing this winter? As a motorcycle rider, a number of roads are unrideable. Lindia, I completely agree. We there's a number of our roads that aren't quite in the situation there should be. That's why we've announced as part of our Greener, Cleaner, Safer initiative that we're going to spend the next 18 months with almost a singular focus on all of those things that people find really important, like fixing our roads, cleaning our streets, making sure that they're as safe as possible. I mentioned earlier on in the Q&A, but even over the next few weeks, we're going to be resurfacing 28 roads across the Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole area, alongside a new heavy-duty road surface that's been going out across other parts of the conurbation later on this month as well. So the answer is absolutely yes. We're going to spend most of this winter doing a whole huge road resurfacing plan, and we're actually building up a package for how we can go even further in the next 18 months, 2 years as well, because it's pointless trying to encourage people, like a motorcycle user is a great way to stop congestion from people in cars, but of course you can't use the roads if they're not in as best condition as possible. So 28 roads coming soon, and more coming next year. Folks, I'm really sorry, but we have run out of time. I've tried my best to go through as many questions as possible. We host these sessions every couple of weeks, normally held by the leader, Cllr Drew Mellor, and also we try and have a different theme for some of the sessions as well. So watch out on all of the social media channels for what's coming in our next session. And thank you very much for joining us today. The team will be trying to answer as many other questions that I've missed in due course. But thanks for joining us, and please stay safe, everyone. Thank you.